Hello, welcome to today's devotional. We've been having a very rainy time here in Nova Scotia. I don't know what your weather's been like, but this July is launching itself off with a lot of wet. Um, anyway, I hope you're having a good time wherever you are. Maybe you're having sun. Wouldn't that be nice? At any rate, here we are. Let's take a look at the scriptures today. We're in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 12 today. So we've been working our way through the Proverbs one verse at a time, as you know. But we've been working our way through chapter 6, which has these little paragraphs. Now, much of the Proverbs later on are just single proverbs. But here in these early parts, there's longer sections of thought that are all connected. And so we've been looking at the little paragraphs just to give us some context. And we're starting a new one of those paragraphs today in verse 12. And I'm going to read, so I'm going to read verse 12 to 15. I'm going to read all those verses just to give us the full context. And then we'll talk about verse 12 specifically, and we'll glean some value from that. So it says this in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 12. I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible, the 1995 edition. That's my favorite translation, so that's one we'll go with. And here we go, verse 12 to 15. It says this: a worthless person, a wicked man, is the one who walks with a perverse mouth, who winks with his eyes, who signals with his feet, who points with his fingers, who with perversity in his heart continually devises evil, who spreads strife. Therefore his calamity will come suddenly, instantly he will be broken, and there will be no healing. Now that's it. Once again, much of the Proverbs uses kind of this poetic language, but it's pretty grim language, right? So I'm going to read verse 12 again, and we're just going to focus on that. But the context of this whole thing is talking about this certain kind of person who is a bad a bad person, right? That there's this person who's wicked, and then which we'll look at verse 12. That's talking about his wickedness, but then it goes on and says this idea about winking with his eyes, signaling with his feet. It's talking about this idea of the guy he's scheming, right? And how he's got a perversion in his heart, and he spreads strife in society and his disaster. That's what this is talking about. So let's read verse 12 again, though, and we'll focus on these descriptive words that are used in this verse. It says, a worthless person, a wicked man, is the one who walks with a perverse mouth. Excuse me. So this whole little paragraph is kind of focusing on the idea of what we might call, say, antisocial behavior, in a sense, if we use a kind of a different term for it. But there's these people sometimes, and you've probably encountered them because, well, there seems to be more of them these days than there used to be, but you probably encountered someone like this who just seems to never be happy until he's made somebody unhappy, or loves to cause trouble, loves to stir the pot, or loves to make strife, or is just the rules never apply to him. Everybody else can follow the rules, but he'll do his own thing as long as he gets ahead, and he doesn't mind taking advantage of people or whatever. And it's kind of really awful, really awful kind of person. And I'm sure you've encountered these people. There are people like that it's almost like they have no conscience. It's like they just don't care about how they hurt people. I mean, there's these scammers, right? That phone you up and try and trick you out of your money. Like, do those people sleep sound at night? There's these people in the world. They just have no sense of conscience. They don't care. They just will do whatever they want to get whatever they want to. And sometimes what they want is actually just to cause harm. And so this is the kind of person this section is talking about, and uses these couple words. One that people are sometimes surprised is in the Bible, when people, even Christians who don't always read their Bible like they should, get surprised that there'll be a phrase like this: a worthless person, right? A worthless man. Excuse me. I've been recovering from pneumonia. But they'll be surprised that there'll be this phrase used, this descriptor used in the Bible, that someone could be considered worthless, right? Now that's this translation. Other translations use the same word. Some translations soften the word an awful lot, but the more accurate word from the Hebrew that this is originally written in is someone who is lacking in worth. They don't have worth, and there's this idea, and so you're like, well, how can that be? What does that mean? Well, it's a hard concept, because when we think about worth in our culture, we often like to think of worth as being an intrinsic quality of something, that things are worth something because they are worth something, simply just intrinsic. which really isn't true. But we like to think that way, but it really isn't true. The only thing that can be said of is God himself. If God did not exist, then nothing else would exist. If God did not have worth, then nothing else would have worth. So God has intrinsic worth. But but everything else in the universe only has worth because of something it's related to, right? Your worth is relative to something. You may look at a bucket and you say, well, what's the worth of this bucket? Like, is there anybody that would want it? Does it have is there any desirability about it? And you'd be like, well, what's it used for? To carry water. If it carries water, then somebody might find that worth something if they're trying to transport water. But if it has a hole in it and the water just always leaks out, then it has no worth for carrying water. So the worth it would have had is not there anymore. Now you might say, well, it might have another worth as a party favor to put on your head and act like it's a hat or something, and you might have some minor amount of worth. Okay, but then it's still a related worth. And so when we think about that with regard to a human, if we think that way, we understand, okay, maybe that's this idea of worthless man is in that regard. Then it's this understanding that with regard to society, with regard to the good functioning of humanity, this person is completely against that, only takes care of themselves. They have no worth to the betterment of humans, of those around them, of other people. There is no worth there. They are simply a hindrance to that. And so when we look at this phrase in Proverbs, that is probably the best way to understand why that word is used with regard to the subject of what the worth would be applied to a person. There is no worth. Now, could the person have, there's another way to look at worth, which is value placed on something, whether or not it has worth with relation to something else. Someone could put value on it. So, for instance, a pebble, you could take a rock off of a gravel driveway, you go out and pick up a rock, and that rock has no particular individual worth to you, right? You can though decide. You can just simply make the decision. I am going to value this little pebble. I'm going to put worth on it. I'm going to polish it up. I'm going to put it in a special place in my room, and I'm going to treat it specially, even though it has no worth to you. It does nothing for you, but you can place worth on it. So there's that idea too. And that would not be what this is talking about in Proverbs. That idea, God places worth on all humans. He sent his son to die for humans that we could be saved because he wants humans to live. He sees the potential of the person. He sees his own image in the person. And so, he places value on people. And so this verse would not be talking about that. This is more from the perspective of, does it have worth with relation to the subject of what it would have worth for a human society? So it starts out saying, listen, there are worthless people. In that regard, there are worthless people. There are people who are actually counter and contrary to the flourishing and the well-being of those around them. That's what this person would be. And so that's how this proverb starts off. There's a worthless person. Then it links that idea to the word wicked, a wicked person, right? So it's a worthless person, a wicked man. And so it's meant to be a parallel of thought there. And when we think, well, what wickedness is this idea of being contrary to God. So wickedness, God being the good, contrary to the good of that God is, contrary to the good even of what society would see as good. So, of course, God, the ultimate judge of what is right and wrong and good. But then even societally wise, with regard to the human culture and grouping, there are people who are contrary to the good of the people. And so there's a wickedness there. And so there's this idea, once again, you can see how that relates to the worthlessness, that there's this person who is contrary to God, contrary to the people around him. He creates harm and strife, and he schemes and he undermines. And so he is wicked and brings badness, and you can use another type of word. You could say he kind of brings curse to the group. And so this is this wicked person. He's very much anti-social. He is against the society. And that's what this is saying. So there's this person. He's worthless. He's wicked. He's against the good. He's against the good of the people. And who is this person? Well, it's the one who walks with a perverse mouth. Walks, of course, being an image for lives, right? Lives by the way in which he lives is by a perverse mouth. And the idea of a perverse mouth is that he uses his words to pervert things from the good. He uses his words to cause harm, to undermine good, undermine social intervention or social values and social good and all that kind of stuff, and more in particular God's ways. So he does this to things like lying or manipulative speech. So in the next verse, going to talk about how he points and he winks, and he's not necessarily lying, but he's scheming and he's trying to get around people, and he's trying to use his communication, his mouth, and even his just his body language to undermine the good of others, to undermine the righteousness of God's law. And this person who lives this way and lives with that kind of deceptive tongue, that deceptive mouth, that person is wicked and worthless to the society. And that's what this is saying. It's very grim. It's not good. And some people may even find it a bit offensive, but it's just simply an observation of fact. When a person is like this, they cause harm. They do not bring good. And so as this goes on, we'll see in our future devotionals, there's a calamitous end for such a person. It doesn't work out well for them. So what's the point of this little paragraph? Well, it's to warn us, like, don't be that person. Don't, if you live by God's ways and with wisdom, you will not do these things, because these things are the hallmarks of this kind of person that ends up with this terrible end. And so don't be this person. And if you encounter these people in your life, don't hate them, love them, but you might want to keep some distance, because they are dangerous and disastrous people. So that's the wisdom here. So anyways, rough subject here, this next paragraph is, but we got to go through it. It's all part of God's word. God help us to not be this kind of person, and to be wise when dealing with someone who's like this. The Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll go into verse 13. Have a great day.